Happy May, Victoria.
Thank you. And you, finally some sunshine outside, at least for a moment today.
It's supposed to be plus 30 or something here tomorrow.
Oh, you're kidding me. No, not here yet, but.
Do you have flowers blooming?
Just the early ones like the daffodils, but even those were really late. Usually those are out in April and they haven't been out till like the end of April. So yeah, funny. And late, last year people were in so early for planting, and this year it's more on a normal schedule. Nobody's really behind yet, but not as many people are in planting at this time of year compared to, say, beginning of May last year. That's for sure.
Could that be a bit of a blessing in disguise since we're still kind of in a bit of a disruptive?
Yes, I think so, especially too with the volume cuts in the processing sector. And a lot of that comes out of the early. So, and plus the processors have sort of pushed back their early crop, taking early crops. So nobody seems to be really in a super rush to get in plants. So I think people are just getting in on a regular schedule and moving forward. So
yeah. You mentioned some cuts in processing and that sort of thing. Where are we at since the last time we talked? How's the market looking?
Yes. So we did, most of the contracts now are negotiated across Canada. I think there's still New Brunswick. Quebec may still have some things to finalize, but Alberta is now done. And I think Manitoba at least has done one, if not both contracts. So in terms of those are really due the frozen processing contracts. But the volume cuts did come separately. So I would say Manitoba was probably hit the hardest. PEI, luckily with their big processor there, are going to be staying flat. Alberta, because of the expansion at McCain, is probably going to come out flat or a little bit up because their fresh and seed might also be up in terms of planted acreage. So we have been kind of going through, United has sort of looked at our first blush on what we expect for planted acreage across the country. So I'll kind of give you those facts at the same time. Manitoba will likely be down, definitely down for the processing, but that might be balanced off partly with some increases in fresh and potentially seed. So we'll see how that goes. The seed sector is a big question mark because the impact of those processing cuts really does hit the seed sector as well, because a lot of that seed got returned if they couldn't plant. But yeah, so that's a bit of a question mark for me on where their acreage is going to go. I think Quebec acreage will be up. It was down close to 700 acres last year, according to Quebec Group. And I think that will come back up, maybe not the full 700, but it definitely will come back up, I think, from last year. So definitely impacts, and I think Manitoba probably will feel it the most in terms of those volume cuts, and we'll see that in their planted acreage for sure.
And in terms of, seed that came out of storage, how is that looking?
Yeah, most of the seed's been moving. PEI is on island. It's moved well. Alberta continues to ship. BC has pushed through most of their seed. I would say Ontario as well. Quebec, to my knowledge, I haven't seen the May holdings will be coming out in about a week. So I'll have a better idea on where the seed holdings are. Usually March is the month that we see a lot of movement, but with all that uncertainty, volume cuts in processing, the trade uncertainty, I think some shipments did get pushed into April. So we'll see what the April movement was like for seed. But I think in general, the crop has moved fairly well. So we'll see, when the May holdings, like I said, when the May holdings come out, I'll have a better idea of where we're at for surplus, but definitely won't be what they're seeing in the U.S. Montana and Idaho are reporting probably 1 million bags of seed, sacks of seed that are not necessarily going to be taken between the two states. So there is a lot of concern that, some of that will end up being planted as fresh acres. The processing acres might get planted as fresh acres. So definitely we are keeping a close eye on that and trying to help figure that out based on our work with the seed sector. So
right.
Yeah.
And in terms of sort of like that movement and how things are going, I mean, did we see, I know we saw some impact from the tariffs,
Yeah.
from the tariff situation market. You know, we just had a Canadian election. You know,
Yep.
not new government in power, but new person in
Right.
at the helm. How do you think that's going to shake out, or will it make any impact now? I guess at the, you know, with planting and.
Well, I think, to be honest, on the planting side of things, I found almost a shift in the mood from, you know, a lot of frustration and concern and about the uncertainty with the tariffs. More, you know, a worry about the uncertainty of tariffs to a frustration with the uncertainty of tariffs. And I think a lot of growers sort of said, look, I'm in this for the long term. I need to move forward. We can't control what's going to happen in terms of tariffs. So a lot of people have just moved forward with planting. It's also from the volume cuts. They came very, very late in the season when people already had fields prepared, especially more in the Pacific Northwest. They were ready to go. Columbia Basin were literally on the cusp of planting when they got their cuts. So we think that a lot of people have moved forward, sort of fingers crossed, with, you know, there will be open acres that are planted this year that don't necessarily have a contract. So we'll see. That's why we're really keeping an eye on that, because how that can flow over into the fresh sector. So we want to keep an eye on that. And the fresh sector is, sort of, you know, we did get the reprieve on the tariffs. And I think at that point, people sort of said, okay, the other part that's really impacting it right now is the alternative crops. There is not a really good profitable alternative crop at the moment. The prices on wheat, canola, and all the other typical, you know, cash crops alternatives are not where they need to be. So potatoes are a profitable crop at the moment in general. You know, people are saying, I'm going to stick with planting the potatoes and sort of move forward, and we'll see how things happen. So
that for sure makes sense.
Yeah.
And what are we seeing on the U.S. side of things right now?
Yeah, and that's where the real interest is. Columbia Basin has moved forward with planting, and I've done, I think, for the most part. And Idaho is actually getting very close to being done in certain areas. Boise area, I talked to someone from Boise that said they're almost done planting. So they've had fantastic weather. So their planting actually went forward very, very quickly and has gone very well. So there is a concern because Idaho does typically plant what we call a flex pile, which is varieties that could go to processing or to fresh. And there is a concern that flex pile will be more fresh oriented due to the volume cuts and processing. So we are trying to keep a close eye on it. I think at this point, the planted acres is one thing. Idaho probably won't go down as much as some people originally thought because of the volume cuts. And but it's going to be more about the harvest. So we have a long way to go. A lot can happen between now and then. Mother Nature, you never know what she has in store. But we will be we have our meeting in August, our United Board meeting, supply and demand meeting. And I think it'll be a critical meeting to really talk about where are we at on expected production and how that's going to impact. Because, you know, planted acres is one, as I said, one factor, but at the end of the day, it's really the crop that comes in on the yield and the amount that's harvested that will really indicate where we are on a total potato pile for North America.
Feeling optimistic?
Yeah, I think so. I think most growers are feeling, from a typical viewpoint of weather, planting conditions and things like that, it's a decent year. It's not the early planting of last year, but I think everybody's okay with that. And it's given people sort of a little bit of time to breathe and really decide what seed they want and how much they're going to plant. And, you know, things, we'll see how the summer goes. I mean, if weather holds, it's been pretty up and down here in Quebec, but we'll see if that holds through the summer. But, excuse me. So I think, you know, from that perspective, I think, you know, it's a good crop year. There's a little bit of concern in terms of, like I said, what the pile is going to look like in the U.S. Mostly, Idaho, just because of the size of their production, and how that impacts all of the markets around it. So,
of course, yeah. We spend so much time talking about in the last few months, obviously, since I guess November, really, about tariffs and weather creeps in as well. But are there any other challenges, opportunities that we're looking at that have nothing to do with those things that we should be aware of?
Well, I think people are really keeping an eye on, there are tariffs to Canada, but there are tariffs elsewhere. And how that impacts, there is equipment that comes from Europe. There are fertilizers that come from elsewhere. So there is an impact on those things coming in, not necessarily coming into Canada, but if it goes into a distributor in the US and then comes from that US distributor, et cetera, et cetera. So there are concerns there. And I think really the dollar, our exchange rate with the US is always something that we're keeping a close eye on. I mean, most recently, it's gotten a little bit stronger. So not always as good for exporters because they like to be attractive with a lower dollar value. But I think economically, it's a good thing. And for those, there are a lot of inputs that our growers in Canada pay in US dollar anyway. So, having a stronger dollar helps them with that production cost. So I think those are some of the things that people are really keeping an eye on. And I think a lot of people have sort of held off a little bit on some of their major expenses that they might have done this year, some capital expenses that maybe they can put off a little bit. Maybe they will, to see how things stabilize and how the economy looks and the dollar value and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I didn't think of that as a trickle-down effect, but you're absolutely right. If you were thinking of purchasing new equipment or
making any big investments that have, US or other country, and they get impacted by the tariff coming into the US and then coming here and we're paying in US dollar, you get sort of a triple effect. So people are, I think, giving it some serious thought this year of maybe holding off a little bit if they can.
Thank you once again for a great update.
No problem. My pleasure.
We will talk again next month for sure.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
All right. Do you have a wonderful spring?
Yes, you too. And happy planting. Good luck with everything to all those growers out there. I hope all goes well.